Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Welcome back.
That's right. Welcome back, Mr. Brady. It's the FantasyGreek.com's Week 5. Starts and sits in 60 minutes here at LateNightSportsRadio.com. And if you thought we were playing that for Tyler Eifert, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But Mr. Brady's back. The world is coming to order. No more Jacoby Brissett. None of that drama. As far as the rest of the drama in the NFL matchups, Jim Sarantias from the FantasyGreek.com is here to set you straight. Jim, happy Wednesday.
Oh. Hey, Mr. Carter.
Oh, my God. Stop. Oh, my God.
What's going on?
That was awful. Was this supposed to be Rorschach?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, God, that was awful.
That was not awful. Tell me how that was awful.
Yeah, I love you to death, but that was awful.
It was not awful. You are so wrong.
Oh, God. And then Xing out of that little song that I had queued up, I totally closed the screen that I had the NFL games queued up here. So,
there you go.
There you go. So you might hear a little auto ad playing here in a minute, but just ignore it. So hi kids. This is, like I said, the FantasyGreek.com's starts and sits in 60 minutes here, the Week 5 edition. Mr. Sarantias and I will go matchup by matchup and tell you who you should start and who you should avoid on your way to fantasy glory. If at any time, if you're listening live and you have a lineup issue, the phone number here is 585-633-7487. That phone number again is 585-633-7487. Or hit us up on the Twitter feed with the hashtag AskTFG. That's hashtag AskTFG. So there you have it. So Jim, what stood out as a thorn in your side from last week? Anything? I'm catching you cold here, I know, but I always like to get one thought that either you loved or drove you nuts last week.
And you and I were talking before we started. I have a team that just, what's driving me nuts right now is all the injuries. Drove me nuts. One of the things that drove me nuts Monday night, Jerick McKinnon had a great game. I actually recommended him as a sit because the Giants had shut down running backs through 3 straight weeks, and if anything, it did not bode well for a running back who generally catches passes out of the backfield, which is what Jerick McKinnon does. And yet, here it was, Vikings just running him, and there he was, totaling up the yards, and he scored, and that sort of bothered me a little bit. I don't care about Odell Beckham. I know some people are all up in arms about that. I think he'll get over it. This weekend, he's going to have a fantastic game. Boy, I'm trying to think what really bugged me. What bugged me? The Ravens bugged me. Why did it take them 3 weeks to figure out who their starting running back is?
Right.
How does
Justin
professional coaches not know that? You know what I'm saying?
Are you driven nuts by the Rams at all? Because I'm driven nuts by the Rams.
I am a little bit. I don't understand them. I don't understand how Casey Keenum could be struggling as much as he has, given the fact that last year he actually did a pretty good job. And they've had all these weeks to prepare for the season. They have arguably the best running back in the league. And yet they're in the thick of things. Mm-hmm. They got a big game this weekend or actually tomorrow night against the Cardinals.
Yep.
So if you're a Cardinals fan and even a prognosticator who thought that it'd be the Cardinals that would be the representative of the NFC in the Super Bowl, I mean, tomorrow night's a huge game.
Another enigma team is the Kansas City Chiefs.
That did drive me crazy as well. Boy, Keith, you really paid attention to all this stuff compared to me. I have to look at numbers and things and sort of kind of remind myself of what the deal is. Yeah, that's a unit that was supposed to, that first week they were terrible, and then they've slowly brought their defensive unit back. And I mean, I didn't expect the Steelers to have as much success as they did, and yet here we go. Ben Roethlisberger, 5 TDs. You know what else drove me nuts? Was I got my daily fantasy. They send an email and they say, here's like the ideal lineup for this past weekend. And I'm looking at the players that were listed, and I thought to myself, there's nobody on this planet that does what I do that picked these guys, each one of them, to be number one in their respective positional class. Impossible.
Right.
Or number two, let's say 2 running backs, 1 and 2, 3 wide receivers, 1, 2, and 3, whatever. And that drives me nuts.
Well, and what about the Giants? I mean, the Vikings defense, yes, that's for real. But the Giants just look like they were not even used to playing in this league.
Well, again, they didn't score any TDs. That's a big problem. That'll drive you nuts. I can't tell you how many people I think are ready to just throw Eli Manning off the roof. And it's funny because if you actually look at his, because he's a recommended start of mine this week, 2 out of 4 games he's actually had solid, productive games, and then the other 2 he's fallen flat on his face. The Vikings, anybody who started him, I mean, we told you it was an unfavorable matchup. Nobody sat here and said start him and expect 500 yards and 3 TDs. Nobody said that. So, I mean, what people are complaining about, that I don't understand. But this weekend, they have, and we'll talk about it more, they obviously have a great matchup against the Packers.
Yeah. Okay.
So, hey, how about them Bears?
Yeah.
That drove me a little nuts.
Finally got off the schneid there, and, just when you think things might be coming together, then they get the devastating news of Kevin White heading to the IR again.
I'm not as worried about that.
That was an important development for that team, though.
It certainly was. You're absolutely right. But I was impressed by the fact that their defense has now for 2 weeks straight been pretty darn good. And they're going up against an Andrew Luck-led Colts team, starting 3 rookies along their offensive line, who I'm not saying that they're going to lose the game because of that, but certainly it makes things a little rougher. And it makes the game very interesting. Very interesting.
And by all reports, John Fox said Danny Trevathan looked good at practice today, so hopefully they'll get him back in the middle.
That didn't drive me nuts. That was refreshing. It was refreshing. Not the injury, not that news, but Paxton Lynch. I mean, he stepped in there and he was solid.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I think he's ready to go. It's just a matter of my guess is the preference is to let him sit there and learn more about the offense. Sort of like Trevor Siemian. Mm-hmm. You're talking about Danny Trevathan.
Yeah, Trevathan, not Trevor. Yeah, Danny
I'm sorry,
Trevathan
I just got
Bears.
confused.
No.
That is great news for the Bears.
Yep.
I mean, that defense, it should be as good, if not better, than it was last week. So that is good news. But sort of moving along, refreshing was, I thought, Paxton Lynch.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if you listen closely, you can hear Jared Goff being left in the background. Yeah, because Carson Wentz, and now Paxton Lynch, and Goff is not even close to seeing the playing field right now. The number 1 overall pick.
You know what I find frustrating is I think what's his name, the head coach of the Rams,
Fisher
just got signed to an extension,
and he's making them look like geniuses now. Not that it's all him. But
and I don't understand it. I mean, this is a team that should have been contending years ago, and yet they're constantly sort of not. It's either the defense, it's either the offense. They're missing something, and every rookie's gotten out there and done well so far this year, including the backups. And I think Jared Goff should be out there playing football.
And there's a contingency that would side with you, but I'm not ready to say that Jeff Fisher's not in that camp. I think he is in your camp. I think Goff is that behind the curve.
Oh.
I think he's that far behind.
Well, then people should have been listening to me when I was saying take Carson Wentz first. So
right.
Nobody was listening to me. Yeah, or the other prognosticators. Some with better credentials than myself, even though mine have improved very much over the last 4 years. Very much.
All right, let's get into the mix here, shall we?
Let's do it. Yes.
For Week 5. Starting with the Thursday night game, the Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers divisional game. Cardinals limping here after losing to the Rams last week, 17-13. They are without Carson Palmer, who is recovering from a concussion. So Drew Stanton gets under center here, so that changes the makeup of this game just a little bit. The 49ers losing to the Cowboys last week, 24-17. They are 0-3. So you have to ask yourself, how much of a difference maker is Carson Palmer here? to the Arizona Cardinals, and I would say it's a pretty big one here. The Cardinals are only averaging just over 100 yards per game, even though David Johnson was supposed to be the second coming of Christ. They haven't been able to really put it together for whatever reason, but they are still gaining 382 yards per game total, 281 through the air. They're scoring 23, but lo and behold, the 49ers aren't that far behind. They're only averaging a half point less per game. And you look at the defensive comparison, and that's where the Cardinals should have an edge, but it's really not that much of a difference here. They're averaging 20 points per game rather allowed. The 49ers just about a touchdown more, 20 to 26.8 is the difference there. And third down conversion allowed, they're pretty even, 44.6 for the Cardinals defense and 43.1%. This game is in San Francisco. I'm with Drew Stanton under center. You know what? I'm going to start the show off with my crazy pick, and I'm going to pick the 49ers to actually win this game and drive Bruce Arians bonkers.
I'm going to take the Cardinals in this one because I think it is such a must-win. Their backs to the walls. The defense is going to just come out and play a fantastic game. I think Drew Stanton's going to take this week and do enough to get situated with his offense. From a fantasy perspective, the only two real good plays here are going to be David Johnson and Carlos Hyde. I suppose if you have Larry Fitzgerald, I'd consider him for a wide receiver 3. As soon as they announced that Carson Palmer was going to play, John Brown for me I don't know how you justify playing him this week. Certainly Michael Floyd's not worth it. On the 49ers side, again, it's just Carlos Hyde. What's nice about this game and why I think it plays towards the Cardinals is the fact that it'll likely be low scoring. And I think that's a good thing for them. Lastly, I want to tell the fantasy people out there with Carson Palmer. Here's another player that has just created all this controversy in the fantasy football team owner community, his struggles. If you go to the Fantasy Greek right now on our homepage, there is strength of schedules. If it moves on down the line, you can't find it, go to the analytics tab. Go to the strength of schedules. Carson Palmer right now is in the toughest stretch of his schedule. If you can just wait a couple weeks, start somebody else instead of him for the next couple weeks. When they come out of the bye, he has one of the best schedules around. If you need a quarterback, if you're set, sort of getting by, and you want to trade for some, go get Carson Palmer. I'm telling you, he has a great schedule. This team will turn it around. Hopefully it just won't be too late for them in reality. But I'm going to take the Cardinals. I think this is where their true spirit comes through, and the 49ers sort of being this first-year team under Chip Kelly, that's going to sort of be their downfall this week.
The Washington Redskins travel to the Baltimore Ravens. The Redskins now 2-1 after beating Cleveland last week in a game that they were behind for a very big part of, but ended up winning by 11, 31-20 at home. The Ravens losing a nail-biter, 28-27 there in a game that they probably should have won, but losing at home to Oakland. They also are 2-1. So now we get to the head-to-head comparisons here. The Ravens and the Redskins both rush the same. They pass even enough. They score even enough. Something's got to give, right? Well, the Ravens do play better defense. It's just a mere fact here, and because of that, I think you're going to see the Ravens pull out a win here. I'm taking Baltimore at home.
I'm going to take the Ravens at home too. This is going to be a game where we're going to have a decent amount of scoring. The final score will probably be like 24-17, something like that. But I like their defense like you do, and I also think this is where their offense really comes alive, especially their running game. Terrence West is a must-start this week if you were lucky enough to get him off the waiver wire. I know Kenneth Dixon is coming back. Certainly if he's available in your league, go get him. I don't think that this matter of who the starting running back is settled in Baltimore, but whether it be Terrence West or the combination of the two of them, the Redskins team is like top 5 in most fantasy points allowed to the position. We're talking about over 4 games, well over 500 all-purpose yards. At least one of these guys is going to get a TD, if not both of them. And even Joe Flacco ends up being a decent start. I love Steve Smith this week. He was one of my deep sleepers last week because nobody would been really talking about him. But he's been targeted 2 games in a row 11 times. When you're targeted 11 times, you're going to get, especially a guy like him, 8 receptions, 100 yards, 1 TD. That should easily be done for him. Mike Wallace is a wide receiver 3. Dennis Pitta remains a TE1, but more of a mid-range to low range. On the side of Washington, I mean, Kirk Cousins is going to have to throw the football. So I think that leaves him as sort of a low QB1, definitely high QB2 in 12-team leagues. In 14 to 16, you will likely be starting him. I do not like Matt Jones. He is benchable. Regardless of what he did last week, the Ravens have been very tough against running backs. It's a good week to avoid him. And then Djax, I think he's a wide receiver 3. Crowder, I would avoid him this week. Last week really sort of was a slap in the face, a punch in the face, what have you, that he took such a huge step back in what was a very favorable matchup. And you keep starting Jordan Reed because he's Jordan Reed. Ravens win.
The New England Patriots travel to the Cleveland Browns. The Patriots coming into this game 2-1 after a shell-shocking shutout loss to Buffalo at home, 16-0. The Browns losing that game to Washington, I just talked about in Washington, 31-20. I had said last week that I thought something had clicked with the Browns and that they would actually win that game, and I thought for most of Sunday that I was going to be right. However, now they face a New England team, albeit at home, that's getting an injection of Mr. Brady. Mr. Giselle Bundchen is back under center, and you look at how the Browns play defense, and they give up 28 points per game, and it's just not going to get any easier this week. This is a no-brainer, picking the Pats on the road.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious after I did my rankings. I sort of went around and just kind of looked at what some other people had done. My number 1 ranked player for this week is Tom Brady. And I don't know how anyone in their right mind can't say that. I mean, here's a guy who's been sitting around for 4 weeks, chomping at the bit. He's got all these tremendous playmakers around him who are chomping at the bit, waiting for him to get back. They're going to come out and against arguably one of the worst defenses in the league. They should light these guys up. So I'm starting all my Patriots. I mean, with exception, Amendola, I would start in a deeper league where you need a flex. James White. Oh, one of the big pieces of news to watch is LeGarrette Blount. He has been he's questionable with a hip injury. I can't recall right now if it was the one he had an injury a little bit earlier in the season, if it's the same one. But whatever the case, this is a part of his body. If he's truly hurt, James White is likely going to get the start here. And James White, I mean, the matchup is so good. I had LeGarrette Blount as a must start until I saw his injury status. And if Blount doesn't go, James White is the guy to go with. So keep your eyes out for that if you have James White or you're one of these guys that's been ravished by injuries to your running backs. Obviously start Brady, Edelman, Gronk if he's good to go. Go ahead, start Martellus Bennett as a low TE1. For the Browns, I think their best plays are going to be Isaiah Crowell and obviously Terrell Pryor. However, Crowell is no better than a second running back. If you drafted him as your third, seriously consider benching him because we all know the Patriots are going to go after what your strength is. And right now with a young rookie quarterback, their strength is running back. Terrell Pryor then is going to be matched by their best defensive end or defensive back along with a safety probably over the top. So I'm not sure what kind of game he has. At best, he's a flex play in a deeper 14 or 16 team league. This is for your office pool, for those pick'em pools. This has to be the number 1 team right here. They're guaranteed to win. Patriots.
Philadelphia Eagles travel to the Detroit Lions, and there's no truth to the rumors that the Eagles have filed an appeal with the town of Philadelphia to change the city's name to Wentzylvania. But Carson Wentz mania has taken over.
Was that a joke?
You like that? Wentzylvania.
Did you make that up?
I did. No, I heard that on multiple. I can't take credit for it, but that's the best nickname I've heard for Carson Wentz yet is Wentzylvania for what's going on with Philadelphia. They're 3-0. They were on a bye last week, but the last time we saw them, they were smacking around the Pittsburgh Steelers at home 34-3. And before that, I thought that the Eagles' defense was suspect. After that one game, I am a believer, and they're coming into the Detroit Lions, who are 0-3. They just lost to Chicago, albeit by just a field goal, but still lost to the previously winless Bears, the Brian Hoyer-led Bears, nonetheless. This is not a good matchup for them simply because Philadelphia's defense is just knocking the crap out of people. They're only giving up 9 points a game. They're only allowing teams to complete less than a third of their third down conversions. They're giving up just a shade over 200 yards through the air and 71 yards on the ground, which is all right because the Lions have no desire to run the ball at all. The Eagles win this game on the road, Detroit. I'm sorry, Philadelphia.
Yeah, the Eagles. I'm right there with you, Keith. This team has just been doing some amazing things. Defensively, they have yet to allow a single passing touchdown. How do you do that with a rookie quarterback is beyond me. So when it comes to Detroit Lions players on your team, I mean, I have Matt Stafford as a quarterback. One of my teams, I have to play him for a variety of reasons. But if I had my choice, I would not. I would not play Theo Reddick. Marvin Jones to me is a wide receiver too. I mean, you got to consider his upside, especially in a PPR league. I don't even think Eric Ebron is playing. Anquan Bolden, don't bother. Golden Tate, I don't know about you, Keith. If you've seen this, his snaps have gone down. I mean, he is in the doghouse for whatever reason, and I think in fantasy, if you have him on your roster, you can go ahead and cut him because I just don't know if he's going to come out of this. And then for the Eagles, Carson Wentz makes for a great start. Hoyer threw for, I think it was around 250 or 300 and 2 TDs, somewhere in there. Carson Wentz should be able to walk out there and do the same thing, especially coming out of the bye week. Jordan Matthews makes for a start. The Eagles' defense, if you didn't pick them up off your waiver wire like I tried to do, I was only successful in one of my leagues to get them, but they're a must start. And they're going to be a start as long as they're playing well. Just keep starting them. The big issue with the Eagles is going to be Ryan Matthews in that whole running back situation. I think Matthews is obviously the guy to start. If you have room on your bench for Wendell Smallwood, go ahead and add him. As far as Darren Sproles is concerned, this game does not set up as well as the one from 2 weeks ago where I told you to play him as a deep sleeper. Sproles, this is one where he might actually just not get enough receptions to be worthwhile, so I would not consider him. But in the meantime, Keith, it's the Eagles, baby. Go stream Carson Wentz. Stream him.
There's just no way to make that a catchy chant. Like, stream, baby. Like, there's nothing you can do with that word.
Who loves you, baby? No, but Carson Wentz, man. I mean, I think he's the real deal.
Pennsylvania, I'm telling you. All right, the Chicago Bears travel to the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts losing last week in London to the Jacksonville Jaguars, 30-27. They sit at 1-2. Bears likewise 1-2, winning at home against Detroit. And what was really impressive for the Bears, like you alluded to during the last matchup, is that the defense right there. I mean, the Detroit offense may not be world beaters, but they play pretty good. And for Chicago starting, all of that youth in the secondary really played right out of their pants last week. Now, that's the only thing the Colts have going for them is Andrew Luck and their passing offense. So if the Bears can somehow contain that on the road, the Colts defense is giving up 31.2 points per game. And if you look at what the Bears have done offensively, it hasn't lit anybody's world on fire. However, with Jordan Howard now being the starting running back for the meantime, I do think that you will find a lot more open field for Mr. Hoyer. He's also shown a greater mastery and being able to perform better in this offense than Jay Cutler did before his injury. So the fact that John Fox will not commit to Cutler coming back should be no surprise to anyone. On the road, the Colts defense is just atrocious right now, and they have nothing going offense. If you watch that game from London against the Jaguars, you really feel bad for Mr. Luck because he's out there, and that offensive line is atrocious. The only good thing going for them is that the Bears really can't generate much of a pass rush. I just don't like anything the Colts have going for them right now, and the Bears are actually the arrow is actually pointing up on these guys. I'm taking the Bears on the road.
Wow. I'm going to take the Colts, and this was a tough game to pick just because of how the Bears have been playing and because of some of the deficiencies that we've seen in the Colts. But the one thing that Colts have going for them is they had a week of practice. They can immediately identify the problems with their offensive line and these rookies that they have in there, and they can play better. They can play to the idea of avoiding getting Andrew Luck sacked and hurt. So to me, I think that that's a good thing. if you're looking at this game from a fantasy football perspective, it all points towards an above average scoring game, which is a good thing if you have some of the key playmakers on both teams. So Brian Hoyer is a low-end QB1 this week in 12-team leagues. You can start him and expect about 240 yards and 2 TDs from him. Those are solid numbers. That's what you want from sort of a guy in a week like this where we have 4 quality teams on buys with 4 quality quarterbacks on buys. Jordan Howard is actually one of the best starts of the week. And Keith, do you want to know how he is one of the best key starts of the week?
Tell me.
I'll tell you. It's really kind of interesting. The Lions have given up over 4 games over 620 all-purpose yards to the position and 6 TDs. I mean, Jordan Howard should be a top 10 guy, no problem. Actually, I'm going to kind of look at him a little bit closer for daily fantasy, just because I think that's how good this matchup is. And the Bears are certainly going to ride him as much as they can, especially in the passing game. Alshon Jeffrey, I think, makes for a great start this week, primarily because Kevin White's not going to play. And Brian Hoyer's got to throw the football to somebody. So if you even are in a deeper league where you're looking for a flex, your 14, 16-team league, or one of these leagues where you've got 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, but then 2 or 3 flex positions, look at Eddie Royal. Eddie Royal has been getting more targets. He's been getting more receptions. He's being more productive. He's a player that should be able to produce for you. And lastly, Zach Miller. I also like the Bears as sort of a low-end streaming option in these deeper leagues where your primary defense has pulled a tough matchup. You could look for them for something. For the Colts, Andrew Luck. Frank Gore's got a tremendous good matchup. Andrew Luck is more of a low-end QB1 this week. So let's say you have Carson Wentz as your second quarterback. I'd actually start him ahead of Andrew Luck. So don't be scared to do something like that. Keep starting T.Y. Hilton. And Philip Dorsett remains a wide receiver 3. The tight ends, don't bother with them, at least this week.
The Tennessee Titans travel to the Miami Dolphins. The Titans sitting at 1-2, 2-game losing streak after losing to the Houston Texans in Houston, 27-20. The Dolphins also 1-2, getting just completely whacked around by Cincinnati in Cincinnati, 22-7 last Thursday night. AJ Green just totally went nuts. You look at how these teams match up head to head. The rushing game for the Titans is much better developed than anything the Dolphins have going on. $127 a game there. They're converting at 41% of their third downs. The Dolphins only 26.7%. On the other side of the ball, the Dolphins are giving up 401 yards per game. The Titans not that much better at 350, but you look at the Dolphins getting shredded for 272 through the air and another $129 on the ground. Both teams are allowing very similar. This is going to be a lot closer than anyone wants to admit. The only chance the Titans have is if Marcus Mariota can protect the football and they can run. The Dolphins are giving up, like I said, almost 130 yards per game. Titans are going to need to control the clock. How do you pick this game? Honestly, I'm just strictly I really have no idea who's going to win this game because it could really go either way. The Dolphins' defense is better on third downs, and they're home. So I'll flip the coin, and I'll pick Miami to get off the schneid and win this game.
So, this is a tough game to call because there's a lot of things I like about the Titans. But the key is Marcus Mariota. He's had favorable matchups so far this season, and he just hasn't produced. But that's a good thing in fantasy football for anyone who has DeMarco Murray. I had somebody offer me Russell Wilson for my DeMarco Murray, and I laughed that off and immediately rejected it. Do not trade this guy. In fact, start him every week from here on out, and you can consider him as a daily fantasy play anytime you want. There's no real playmakers on this Titans team. I do like their defense. It's been very strong. And then you roll over to the Dolphins, and J.J. is going to get a majority of the carries, and it really doesn't matter because the Titans are top 5 against the position in fantasy football, so ignore that. Ignore Ryan Tannehill because the Titans actually are pretty good defensively. Jarvis Landry is your best bet in a PPR league. Maybe Devontae Parker if they get it going. Like you, Keith, I'm going to take the Dolphins, but this is going to be an ugly game, and I think they're projecting it sort of an average scoring game. I could see it being a low scoring game.
All right, the Houston Texans travel to the Minnesota Vikings. The Texans are 2-1 after beating Tennessee last week, coming back from that 27-0 shutout in New England. The Vikings 3-0, baby. And let me tell you something. This Vikings team is for real. For all the question marks we had about them offensively, on the defensive side of the ball, they more than make up for it in spades. They are giving up 12.5 points per game. They're only giving up 82 yards on the ground and 223 through the air. They've taken back-to-back opponents and smacked them around, going to Carolina. Then they welcome the Giants at home, and they just had nothing going for them. And now you're going to prop up Brock Osweiler against this team. I don't like it at all for the Texans. Minnesota being at home, that place is going to be jazzed. It's a nice new stadium. I'm picking the Vikings. No reason to pick against them.
Yeah, Keith, it was funny. One of my leagues, somebody actually dropped the Vikings, and it's one of those leagues where they give you that fictitious budget, so you have to bid money to get them, and I just jumped all over it, and I got them. That defense is just amazing what they have done, and against everybody. There's been nobody that's been able to handle that defense. So keep starting them. But on offense, outside of Jerick McKinnon, who has a great matchup this week, it's going to be tough to start anybody else except Kyle Rudolph, only because Kyle Rudolph has been the go-to guy when they've gotten into the red zone. When he's got like 3 games in a row with a TD, I could count this as 4. He might as well. The Texans, boy, Lamar Miller's, I guess, an RB2 this week. I wouldn't bench him, but he's going to struggle a little bit. Brock Osweiler, I would avoid him at all costs. Will Fuller is really the best fantasy play on this team, and that bothers me because I've got DeAndre Hopkins on a couple of teams, and DeAndre Hopkins, the problem with him is Brock Osweiler. Brock Osweiler just won't throw him the football if he's covered, and that's a problem because then every once in a while that he does, DeAndre Hopkins just doesn't have the experience with him and able to haul in the football. So until somebody sits down with Brock Osweiler and says just throw the football to him, it's going to be tough on DeAndre Hopkins. I would view him as more a wide receiver too. I would try not to bench him unless you clearly have guys ahead of him. But I'm just sort of giving you the heads up that the struggle is real, Keith. The struggle is real. Skull Vikings.
So you're picking?
Did you see? I'm taking the Vikings. Yeah. Did you see when those the fans they do the Skull Vikings thing and they clap?
No, I missed that.
Oh man, it's something to see. I'd never seen that in a televised Vikings game.
Can we backtrack? You gave all that information, and I don't think I remember you picking who was going to win the Titans and Dolphins.
Oh, the Vikings. Oh, the Dolphins. I'm taking the Dolphins at home.
Okay.
Yeah. So far, you and I think have picked every game the same except one.
Yeah, except Thursday. All right, the Jets.
No, and the Bears Colts.
You're right. Yeah. The Jets travel to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Jets are 1-2 and not looking good at all. The Steelers having a Jekyll and Hyde little run here, beating Cincinnati week 1. Then they get smacked around by Philadelphia 34-3, and then they come back and they light up Kansas City 43-14. So what's going to happen here? This Jets team is reeling right now. They're struggling to find what makes them them. Ryan Fitzpatrick has been more Fitz-tragic than Fitz-magic so far this year, and they are traveling to Pittsburgh. I don't see any way that the Jets win this one. I'm taking the Steelers at home.
Yeah, I don't know how you go against the Steelers at home. And just what they did last week to the Chiefs, I still can't get my arms around it, can't get my head around it. So Steelers, start your playmakers, Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Bryant, Le'Veon Bell. I like Jesse James this week as sort of a low TE1 or so. If you have a bye and you need to get somebody, he's I think a solid option this week. To a lesser extent, Sammy Coates. I've seen some people get high on him, and I think he had 80-some yards last week, and that's all nice and dandy. Can he do it again this week and get you a TD? Yeah, maybe. 12-team league, I don't see playing him, but I do see playing him in a 14 or 16-team league, so you can go ahead and start him. For the Jets, love Brandon Marshall, love Matt Forte. They're both playmakers last week. We saw how important Brandon Marshall is to that offense, and without Eric Decker, who else is Ryan Fitzpatrick going to go to? Quincy Enunwa is a nice wide receiver 3 or flex play in deeper leagues, but that's about it. So Brandon Marshall is going to be your go-to guy. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick, for all the people out there that want to start him this week, please raise your hands. Anybody? Okay, so don't start him. He's having one of the worst seasons I've seen in a quarterback, and there's just no reason to play him against the Steelers team in Pittsburgh after what they did last week to the Chiefs.
All right, the Atlanta Falcons travel to the Denver Broncos. The Falcons 3-0 after beating Carolina in a big divisional game at home, 48-33. Yes, I know Cam Newton had a concussion and whatnot, but still 48-33. The Denver Broncos also 3-0 going into Tampa and winning 27-7. The Atlanta Falcons offense has been truly eclectic. When I say 478.8 yards per game, 354 through the air, another $124 on the ground, scoring 38 points per game. Something's got to give here because they're running into a Denver defense that only gives up 16 a game and only gives up 170 approximately through the air. Denver Broncos being at home, that plays well. Atlanta is going to struggle in this game just because of Denver's defense. And I'm going to stick with the home team here. I'm going to take the Broncos to win this game and go to 4-0.
I will not go against the Broncos defense, especially playing in Denver. I can tell you one thing for certain. Julio Jones will not catch 300 yards receiving. Would I bench him? Absolutely not. He is such a dynamic receiver. Matt Ryan is going to go to him because of the few options he has on the field. I would continue starting Devonta Freeman. Matt Ryan, to me, is more of a low QB1. Certainly in deep leagues like 14 or 16 team leagues, 12. Yeah, this is just a tough matchup. Broncos have been just devastating to the opponent's passing games, and let's see how devastating they've been. They've allowed 776 yards through 4 games, so that's less than 200 yards per game, and just 2 passing TDs. Even if they give up a passing TD this week, that's still not going to be very good for Matt Ryan. So I would really hesitate on any of those guys. Maybe Jacob Tamme, maybe. Broncos, I actually like Paxton Lynch this week if he ends up getting the start. Danny Trevathan is I'm sorry. Why am I mixing the two up? Trevor Siemian is out. And I actually like him. And, there's a few players I would consider playing him ahead of. So why don't you check out our rankings at thefantasygreek.com and you can see who that is. I definitely would start Demaryius Thomas. I would start Emmanuel Sanders. This is a weak Falcons defense overall. Expect decent games from them. Expect a big game from C.J. Anderson. And you start those Broncos defense like clockwork. Broncos win.
All right, the Cincinnati Bengals travel to the Dallas Cowboys. The Bengals sitting at 1-2, finally getting off the schneid, beating the Dolphins last Thursday night, 22-7. The Dallas Cowboys 3-0 with Dak Prescott, going into San Francisco and pulling out that game, 24-17. Head-to-head comparisons, the Bengals and Cowboys match up pretty evenly offensively, except that the Cowboys are a much better running team, $149 a game for the Cowboys. The Bengals offense mustering just 80, and the Cowboys putting up 25 points per game, which is remarkable when you think that Dak Prescott has not thrown all that many touchdown passes. They are converting 50% of their third downs. That is a challenge. On defense, they average close enough to each other and the same amount of points. Third down conversion, though, the Cowboys are allowing opposing offenses to complete 43% of their third downs. The Bengals just 36.5%. So here's what's going to happen, kids. The Cowboys are home. They're going to run, and Cincinnati is not, what's the word I'm looking for? They're pretty stout defensively themselves. They play actually better defense than the Cowboys do. Is this the game Andy Dalton just lights the world up? It's kind of hard to say here. This is a real tough game to pick. The Cowboys have been executing much better than anybody could have expected at home. I think the fact that they are doing so well running the ball, I think that bodes well at home, and I'm going to pick the Cowboys to win this game.
I'm going to take the Bengals in this one. I think what we saw last weekend was a nice turnaround game for them. Certainly, they showed that a quarterback like Ryan Tannehill cannot beat them. Neither could the Dolphins' running game. And while I do like Ezekiel Elliott this week, I would never tell you to bench him. I think he's going to have a solid game from a fantasy football perspective. I think the Bengals' pass defense is good enough, especially with Des Bryant looking like he's going to sit out again, to shut down everything else. Andy Dalton is not going to have his big game until Tyler Eifert gets back. When Tyler Eifert gets back, which I don't believe will be this week, he will be unstoppable. If you have to stream Andy Dalton in a 2-quarterback league, I think this is a good enough matchup. You can go ahead and do that. I absolutely love A.J. Green. As far as the running backs for the Bengals, Gio Bernard has not really done too much. So, I would lean staying away from him. But Jeremy Hill, on the other hand, I think has some RB2 value. Certainly as a high-end flex play in deeper leagues. I'm going to take the Bengals in this one.
All right, the Buffalo Bills travel to the L.A. Rams. The Bills with a shocking shutout win, 16-0 over the New England Patriots, to move to 2-1. Hey, maybe it was Greg Roman after all. And then the Rams sitting at 3-0. If you had the Rams being 3-0 and you're trying to tell people about it, no one will believe you. So just stop talking. Beating the Cardinals in Arizona 17-13. So here, how do these teams match up? Well, the Bills much better on the ground through the game, which is surprising because the Rams have some guy named Todd Gurley that you would think that they'd be much better at that, but they're only averaging 76 and change on the ground per game. Bills up over the century mark, $123. The passing offenses are pretty similar. The Bills are scoring about 6 points more per game. Third down conversions about the same. Time of possession also even. On defense, the Bills are just slightly better in yards, slightly better in passing yards, slightly better in rushing yards, slightly better in points per game. But the third down complete conversion percent allowed, the Rams are allowing 44%. But the thing is here, they're the home team. This is actually a pretty even matchup. The Rams are on a roll, and I'm not buying the Bills yet. I know that they just shut out the Patriots, but it was Jacoby Brissett's Patriots. I'm taking the Rams here at home, and I can't believe I just said that out loud.
Yeah, I can't believe you said that either. Do you feel a little dirt?
I do.
A little dirty
I do. I do. And you know what? The Rams are going to get blown out, and I'm just going to go back to hating Jeff Fisher.
So I'm getting an echo. Yeah.
Not on my end.
Okay. So I'm going to try and get through this, even though I'm speaking over myself. This is a tough, low-scoring game. I love the running backs here. LaShawn McCoy and Todd Gurley should just have tremendous games. Tyrod Taylor, I would say, is a low-end start in 14 or 16-team leagues. He should be good for a passing TD as well as a rushing TD. You throw in McCoy with one. The Rams, I'm kind of looking around saying, so what are you guys going to do? And I'm having a hard time coming up with that. I could see 14 scores or 14 points, a couple of field goals, but I'm going to take the Bills in this one. With the primary starts being the running backs. I like Robert Woods for the Bills in deeper leagues because last week he was targeted like 10 or 11 times. It was an insanely high number for him, so he should be guaranteed 80 to 90 yards every week while Sammy Watkins is out, which I will predict will be the rest of the season. If you have him on your roster, I'm telling you, go ahead and dump him. Don't worry about it. He's either going to be ready at the end of the season to just sort of start working out, or at the end of the season they're going to finally say, you know what, you're not getting any better, you need surgery. So don't sweat that. Both defenses are playable this week. Casey Keenum can make enough mistakes to make the Bills worthwhile, as could Tyrod Taylor against a good Rams defense. But I'm going to take the Bills in this one. I like how this game sets up for them. The Rams are sort of a team that I just think is slightly behind them.
All right. The Chargers travel to the Oakland Raiders in an AFC West matchup. The Chargers sitting at 1-2 after losing to the Saints 35-34 in New Orleans. I'm sorry, at home rather. The Raiders 2-1 after back-to-back road wins at Tennessee and Baltimore last week by 1. The Raiders are a little bit charmed, I think, after last week, and this is a tough matchup. The Chargers play pretty good defense, even though they haven't been able to keep points off the board. I don't like this matchup as far as the Oakland running game versus the Chargers defense that is giving up only 82 yards per game. Phillip Rivers and company, they pass for about 265.8 per game. The Raiders, 265.5. Pretty even from that standpoint, but the Chargers are up over 46% on their third down conversions. So I am going to go out of my usual realm, and in a division game, I'm going to pick the road team. I like the Chargers in this.
And I'm going to take the Raiders here. I just, they're on a roll. Their confidence couldn't be any higher, and this is a great week for them to go up against the Phillip Rivers-led San Diego Chargers, who have sort of had their own struggles so far this season. But I like what the Raiders are doing overall. This game is predicted to be the highest scoring game of the week. And in fantasy football, what that means is you play everybody that's fantasy relevant. So for the Chargers, Phillip Rivers, Melvin Gordon, Travis Benjamin makes for wide receiver 3. Terrell Williams makes for wide receiver 3. Inman, I can't think of his first name. Can you, Keith?
Say this again?
Inman.
Inman?
Inman, yeah. Inman.
Oh, Dontrell.
Yeah, thank you, Dontrell Inman. So Dontrell Inman is a player that I like in deeper leagues as a flex play. And Hunter Henry, who should again be filling in for Antonio Gates, I think is a worthwhile TE1. For the Raiders, you're gonna roll with Derek Carr, Michael Crabtree after what he did the other week. Oh my God, forget it. Amari Cooper, start him. Clive Walford, low end TE1 at the running back position. Tonight there was late breaking news that Latavius Murray is doubtful. He is likely not going to play. He has a toe injury. It's unclear if this is just one of those 1 week things or if it could go longer. So if you're hearing this and you need running back help, go out and pick yourself up DeAndre Washington and start him against the San Diego Chargers team, which is pretty darn awful against the running back position in fantasy football. And Keith, I know you're asking me, how awful are they?
How awful are they?
Well, they're so bad that they've given up over 550 yards from scrimmage to the position and 8 TDs. That's 6 rushing, 2 receiving. So DeAndre Washington is in line for a huge game. Go ahead and pick him up and get him started, but I'm going to take the Raiders at home.
The New York Giants travel to the Green Bay Packers. The Giants at 1-2 after losing in Minnesota 24-10 last week. The Packers 2-1. They were on a bye last week, but the last time we saw them, they were getting out in front early against Detroit and then holding on for dear life, winning that game 34-27. How do these teams match up? Well, the Packers' passing offense hasn't been everything it's all cracked up to be. But the Giants, and neither has their passing defense, for that matter. But the Giants' defense on the other side is giving up 21.2 points per game. The Chargers just a point better. The big difference here defensively is the rush defense. The Packers are only giving up 42 rushing yards per game. That's going to put an intense amount of pressure on Eli Manning, who has just not performed up to snuff. He just hasn't, whatever the reason. Odell Beckham Jr. is picking fights with kicking nets and everything, and it's just a disaster for the Giants right now. Well, Odell Beckham Jr. is coming out saying he's not having fun anymore. You just get the feeling like the team is just saying, just shut up, Odell, just shut up. It's a distraction, and they're going into Green Bay, who's had a week to get ready for this game. On Sunday night, I'm picking the Packers.
Yeah, I don't know how you go against the Packers in this one. I think that besides the bye week, a big reason is the fact that they're playing at home, a place where statistically Aaron Rodgers just plays much, much better than he does on the road. So you start Aaron Rodgers, you start Eddie Lacy, you start Jordy Nelson, and that's it. I hate to say, because Randall Cobb, man, he's not been doing it. And he's had the opportunities. I mean, I suppose you could play him as a wide receiver 3 if you really want. Certainly as a flex play in 14 or 16 team leagues. But he's been pretty bad. Devontae Adams hasn't been very good either. So for me, those are the guys to go with. On the other side, go ahead and start Eli Manning. The Packers are giving up 330 yards passing and 3 TDs per game. That's crazy. Eli Manning, however bad you feel about him, he's had 2 great games, 2 bad games. This is going to be a great game. You start him this week with confidence. Start Odell Beckham Jr. The stuff Keith has mentioned, it's all true. It's all terrible. But you know what? These are just things players can get through. They don't follow you around like other disastrous things. Odell Beckham is going to be fine. It's his third year in the pros. Everybody give him a break. Start Sterling Shepard. Victor Cruz, a flex play in deeper teams. I would avoid Orleans Darkor, Rashad Jennings, whoever the traditional running back is in that offense. I might even avoid Bobby Rainey, who last week I had as a deep sleeper, and that panned out if you played him because of his reception totals and his yardage and his receptions in PPR leagues. But this is going to be a passing game. And at the end of the day, it'll be the Packers, but fantasy-wise, you should be happy with your Giants. Packers win.
All right, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to the Carolina Panthers. The Buccaneers sitting at 0-3, and the Panthers 1-2 after a heartbreaking loss to Atlanta, 48-33, which saw Cam Newton get shaken up. And do we have an update on Cam Newton's status? That's one thing I did not see.
I do not. I think everybody is, for the most part, chalking this off to that he will play, that it just, given that it's the Monday night, he's going to go. I mean, I have him in one of my leagues, and I have no intention of having a backup. So,
okay,
unless Friday something weird happens or Saturday something weird happens.
But Carolina's defense should be the difference maker here. If you look at Tampa Bay, outside of the Week 2 game against the Rams, they've only put up 7 points against the Cardinals, 7 points against the Broncos. Those are two top-notch defenses. Carolina's right up there with them. I don't see Tampa Bay mustering anything much of an offense, especially on Monday night. I'm taking the Panthers.
So I'm taking the Panthers, too. I just don't believe in the Buccaneers' defense, regardless of the troubles of Cam Newton. But I will say this, and I already posted it, so it's no secret. Jameis Winston is a recommended start of mine against this Panthers defense because their defense is struggling in terms of the passing game, having allowed 1,095 yards and 8 pass TDs to the quarterback position, along with a rushing TD. So somehow, some way, Jameis Winston is in line for at least 2, probably 3 touchdowns. I've seen predictions that this is going to be a below-average scoring game, and I just can't get my arms around it. And another reason why Jameis Winston is such a good play this week is, besides Doug Martin not being available until after their bye week, Charles Sims is banged up, and I think his role is going to be limited in this game if he even has one. So you can go ahead and start Jameis Winston. I think you can go ahead and start Mike Evans. At that point, I've seen some people pick up Adam Humphries in deeper leagues and play him. He was great, and last week I didn't keep up with his numbers, but I couldn't recommend him anything more than that. Charles Sims, like I said, he's banged up. I wouldn't go with him. For the Panthers, Cam Newton is obviously a must-start. Kelvin Benjamin likely will be the number one receiver, I think. This is just that good of a matchup. That's how bad the Buccaneers are. You could look at a Ted Ginn as a sleeper because Kelvin Benjamin, I don't think, is going to pull in all the yards that the Bucs are giving up. And here's what they're giving up: 724 yards to the wide receiver position over 4 games, so that's close to 200 yards. But the big number is 9 passing TDs. So Benjamin, in theory, is in line for 2 passing TDs, and if that makes you happy, go start the guy. It's a favorable matchup for the running backs, but I'm not sure which way Cameron is paying Fozzie Whitaker. I kind of like Fozzie Whitaker this week. I think this is a game that lends itself to passing, and that's where we're going to see the Foz. So, again, if you're scrambling around looking for somebody, take a look at Whitaker and give him a go. And Greg Olsen, the ageless wonder, you start him always. Panthers win. Panthers win. Panthers win. Keep pounding, Keith.
All right. We got some time before we hit the hour mark here. So here he goes with Keith's personal fantasy lineup questions. My favorite part of the show, by the way. Got 3 running backs I need to start. Or 3 running backs, I need to start 2 of them. Okay? C.J. Anderson, Ezekiel Elliott, or Le'Veon Bell. I need 2.
Oh, my God. That's a problem?
That is the problem, because I need to make sure. I'm on a 2-game losing streak. I'm 2-2 in this league.
How's that possible?
Yeah,
okay.
Tell me about it.
So let's try this one more time. Slowly.
Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, or C.J. Anderson. I have to start 2.
So C.J. Anderson, I like him. Falcons, they give up about 100 yards rushing and a TD per game to the position. So that's good. Ezekiel Elliott, it's a little bit of a tougher matchup for him, but I'd have a hard time not starting him, right? And then Le'Veon Bell I would start no matter what. He's just too diverse. I think I'd go with Le'Veon Bell and C.J. Anderson in this one.
Okay, it was between Anderson and Elliott, and every time I leave Elliott on my bench, he scores like 20 points.
Well, and if that's what happens to you, Keith, I think you should go ahead and play. Look, they're all three great starts, right? I mean,
an embarrassment of riches.
It is an embarrassment of riches, and damn you for people like me that are scrambling for running backs in one of my leagues.
It's all about working that waiver wire in a dynasty league.
Yeah.
So
I guess.
I didn't in the beginning of the show. I didn't talk about how we did with our picks last week.
Oh, how do we do?
You picked 8 and I picked 7.
Okay.
And the one difference maker was I had my faith in those Browns, and we were both wrong on the Colts beating the Jaguars, the Panthers beating the Falcons, the Ravens beating the Raiders, the Lions beating the Bears, the Pats beating the Bills, the Cardinals beating the Rams, and then the Chargers beating the Saints. There's some bad beats in those picks.
I'll tell you, that was an impressive win by the Raiders over the Ravens.
Yeah,
I mean, there were so many things going against them, and every single thing they basically triumphed. The travel from the West Coast to the East Coast, going up against a good Ravens defense. It just, they just, and their defense did a pretty good job against Joe Flacco. Yeah. Dennis Pitta didn't have a very good game. Terrence West did, and so did Steve Smith, but not Joe Flacco.
They were trailing for most of that game. Well, maybe not most of it, but a good chunk of that game. It showed moxie on the road to come back and win that game.
They did, and I think that's impressive about Jack Del Rio that, they're finding ways to win games that nobody believes they can win.
Right.
And as long as, I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to when they play the Broncos.
That'll be a great game.
I think it'd be a really, really great game.
This week with the Chargers, I mean, the Chargers are banged up and they're not operating on all cylinders yet, but we still might get a pretty good game there, too, another AFC West showdown.
Yeah, Phillip Rivers, he last year, I forget what he had. He had over 600 yards passing. This combined, obviously, both games, and I want to say 3 or 4 TDs. I think it was 4, but 3 were in the first game, 1 in the second. So if there's a time for him to really have a statistical breakout, I think it's this week against them.
I know what I wanted to ask you, get your opinion on. I know you're high on him this week, but going forward, with the state of the Giants' offense, is Odell Beckham Jr. no longer a must start every week, or is he planted in your lineup unless they're on a bye?
I think you have to plant him in your lineup, and here's the problem with the stud wide receivers this year. And I had to. Here's the problem. They're still stud wide receivers, but they're not getting the football. And whether it's, for example, DeAndre Hopkins, the problem is Brock Osweiler, clearly. Eli Manning to Odell Beckham Jr., there's just the connection slightly off. I'm not sure why. Because it doesn't look like Eli Manning's throwing a bad football to him. But I think he's having a little bit more of a tougher time in cover. I think people have had a chance to study him enough and figure out what it takes to stop him. Right. So he's just got to play better. But I can't sit here because he's so. I remember watching one game, and he was doing awful, and suddenly he catches a football and he runs between people and he's got a 30, 40-yard gain. And I go, that's what makes him special.
Right.
And makes him more special than, let's say, an Eddie Royal, who is doing very well in fantasy football, but he's a possession receiver. He's not going to do what Odell Beckham Jr. does. So even if Odell is playing, and even DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, I'm having a hard time benching him because I know sooner or later he's going to blow it up.
Right, and in the 1 week that you do bench him is the 1 week you're guaranteed that he'll have a Julio Jones type day.
Exactly. So and would I consider a trade for him? Yes, it would depend what the people were. What was I getting back? But I wouldn't run out and I wouldn't take anything for him. Like I've had people approach me about different players taking. I go, I wouldn't just take anything for them. I mean, they still are who they are. And here's a great example. Last year, I had both Julio Jones and Russell Wilson on my team, one of my teams, and both of them. People forget this. Both of them struggled in the first half of the season. They were not fantasy dynamos.
Right.
It wasn't until the back half that suddenly their numbers had a huge uptick, and especially Russell Wilson when he lost Thomas Rawls and Jimmy Graham. I mean, the team just turned to passing the football, period. There's nothing else they were doing. But I had traded him away already, and it was too late. So, you need a little bit of patience this year. We've still got 13 weeks of football to go. That's a lot of football.
Yep.
So I wouldn't abandon ship on people. I'm actually trying to sit down and make some time to work on it's a bust or lust article.
Oh,
and
good. I see what you did there.
What's that?
I see what you did there.
You did. Thank you. And obviously, like Golden Tate, he's a bust. Just, toss him away. But, I still lust after Odell Beckham Jr. And if somebody wants to give him to me, I'm going to go take him. Somebody traded me Andrew Luck for Gary Barnidge today.
What?
Yeah.
That's just silly.
That's what I said, too. And I thought to myself, I don't care how poorly he's played these last 4 games, and I don't think he's played poorly in all 4. Maybe you have a bye week and you need a tight end, but okay. Yeah, I'll take Andrew Luck. I'll put him on my bench. I'll stream a tight end for my bye week. I don't care.
Right.
So, and it wasn't, I think my quarterback on this team is actually Drew Brees, so it's going to be funny come out of this bye week, and I'm going to have an extra quarterback I really don't need, so I'm going to try and trade somebody.
Yeah, I was going to say, you start making some offers, yeah.
Yeah. So, you have to sort of be patient with some people, and I started my list. Boy, I wish I had the article done so we could talk more in depth about it. Let me see if I can find this list. Maybe we can talk about a couple. Do we have a little time?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Well, I had mentioned Golden Tate already. Randall Cobb, I think, is a bust. I'm just having a hard time substantiating his existence on any roster. I don't have him on any of my teams, but you look at his numbers and you look at how he's doing now. Could he turn it around? Sure. But he hasn't. Carson Palmer is definitely a guy. He's not a bust. You should either hang on to him or go get him if somebody wants to give him away. Andy Dalton is a guy I think you need to hang on to as well, because as soon as Tyler Eifert gets back, I think his numbers will go up tremendously. Thomas Rawls, I think, is a bust. I cut him from one league. It was a deep league, and I didn't have problems. And today I had to cut him from another where the mentality of the owners is very much long-term. You try not to cut players. But in my situation, I had Sammy Watkins. I have Arian Foster. I have Doug Martin. I have Brandon Marshall, who's been banged up so far, but I suppose that's par for the course. And I had Thomas Rawls. And, my 2 running backs were Kenneth Dixon and Jordan Howard. That's who I'm starting this week, but I'm like, I need one more because I don't know what we're going to get from Kenneth Dixon this week. I think it's a favorable matchup. I think he can be productive. But when I heard DeAndre Washington was going to be the starting running back, or he'll likely be the starting running back, I thought to myself, sky's the limit on this guy. Go get him.
Yeah.
So Thomas Rawls is out the entire month of October. And when he comes back, is he going to be ready at the beginning of November? I don't know.
I think that team's going to be ready to move on without him, personally.
Right. So Christine Michaels there, he's a guy to lust after. He's got the next month to secure himself as – why would anybody, say, okay, Christine, sit down so we can let Tom, let him be the starter. I can't see that. Right. I just can't see that. Dak Prescott, I lust after him. Derek Carr, wow, amazing. I think Matt Stafford's hitting a tough stretch right now, so I'm not sure if he's going to be bust or lust. Carson Wentz, definitely lust. Definitely lust. Melvin Gordon, Isaiah Crowell, LeGarrette Blount, if he's healthy, Tevin Coleman. Let's look at some of the busts over here. A guy I put on this list, but I don't know that he's a bust, but it's certainly, you're kind of like scratching at a little bit of Amari Cooper. He's not.
He's one of those studs that isn't getting the ball enough. You know what I mean? Maybe not stud, but he could be the leader on that team receiving wise. Crabtree has taken that mantle, but for whatever reason, the ball is just not going to Cooper.
Yeah. Todd Gurley lost, despite the fact that he may be bust. If somebody offered him to me for one of my 3rd wide receivers, I'd say, sure, here you go. Take him.
Take him.
Take him. I'll take Gurley any time of the day.
Take this 3rd wide receiver. They're cumbersome. Yeah. They just get in the way.
Yeah, Gary Barnidge has been a bust so far. That's been rough because I really thought he'd be a bigger part of their offense. Antonio Gates, Jared Cook. I'd say Rob Gronkowski's been a bust. I mean, I know he's been a bust. I would want him. He's coming back, and he's going to be great. He's not a guy that I don't think anybody's been thinking about cutting. Hunter Henry for the Chargers. I'm lusting after him because I'm not sure Antonio Gates, when he makes it back, if he's going to be a big part of the offense anymore.
Yeah, we may have seen the last of Antonio Gates.
We may have. How about Jimmy Graham?
He's flashed though. Last week, he flashed last week.
Last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
but I want him. I would want him.
Oh, you're lusting. Okay, that's
sure. I'm lusting. Kyle Rudolph, Cameron Brate, Eagles. I have the Ravens here too, but they've been. Last week was kind of an eye opener. I've got a pretty deep list here of guys, and so anyway, I'm going to try and put something together and get it out there, sort of as a guide to people. If you have these players, how to view them, and if you're looking at trading, how to view them.
I managed to snag the Eagles off the waiver wire.
That's great. I got them in one league myself. Lost them in another. I've seen people just do the weirdest things. Like today, somebody cut Adam Vinatieri, but he had been carrying 2 kickers for a while, and that was sort of a head scratcher to me. I'm in one very deep league where there's no trading allowed. You can only play the waiver wire once a week. So I actually carry 2 kickers in that league. I think we have 23 roster spots. But in a league where you have 14 roster spots, I would never have 2 kickers.
Right.
So, 2 things you should do all the time is, one is Tuesday morning, get up and set your roster for the week. I can't tell you even to this day when I don't do that how I'll miss one of my leagues, and then I'll think, I played so-and-so, and then you go back and you're like, oh my God, they were sitting on my bench.
Right.
Because you didn't set your roster on Tuesday. And then the other thing is every week I run out and see, are there any top-ranked players that aren't on a team? And you would be surprised how often that occurs just by people not paying attention.
Right.
And then look at your team and say, am I happy with what I have? Can I make my team better by adding this player off the waiver wire? And continuously do that. So anyway, Keith, I hope that was I hope I helped you with your rosters.
Oh, no, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at my free agent list in my league right now, and there's Terrence West is still out there.
Oh my God.
Tyrell Williams is still out there.
Yeah.
Which it is what it is, but they're playing the Raiders. Who give up a good amount of points to wide receivers. Hunter Henry's still out there.
See, I one of my leagues, Terrence West is out there, but I have Carlos Hyde, I have Frank Gore, I have Le'Veon Bell, and somebody else, Tevin Coleman. And I'm looking at those 4 running backs and looking at him, and I'm saying, I want the 4 that I've mentioned because they have set roles in their offenses. Terrence West can be supplanted by Kenny Dixon any time.
Right.
So why would I want to dump one of these guys that seems pretty fixed? And I didn't have any other positions where, I could dump that guy, like an extra wide receiver, an extra tight end, and go get him. So anyway.
It's all about the matchups. The matchups.
It is.
All right. Well, guess what, Jim?
It's that time.
It is that time. We are out of time. It's like the DeLorean in Back to the Future. We are out of time. For Jim Saratias from thefantasygreek.com, I'm Keith Grieve from 87 Sports Fans. Head over to thefantasygreek.com anytime between now and Thursday night for any updates for the early games. And then as we go on to Sunday morning, as you're doing your morning rituals, head over there and get all the latest news and ranking updates. We're here every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern at 89sportsradio.com. Good luck, and may the odds be forever in your favor.